My name is Prabhpreet Sangha. I'm a lawyer at Lehal Law, and today I'm looking forward to sharing some information on what it is to be an international student studying in Canada, and also in particular I will talk about some immigration related matters as well. So I would like to share who is considered an international student. An international student is someone who enrolls into a designated learning institute program, and they come to Canada to study. In order to get a study permit, a person will require an acceptance letter. They will need to be enrolled into the program at a designated learning institute. And main component of being a student is being able to afford the tuition fees for the international student, which can be pretty costly, almost triple the amount than a Canadian student. Okay, so some of the legal challenges that we're finding that international students are encountering is that they are not aware of their legal rights or the laws of Canada. And unfortunately, what happens is when they're coming from certain countries and the system is a little bit potentially more corrupt in those countries, they're afraid of seeking the government authorities such as police, the RCMP here, and get help when they need it. So another thing that we want to share is basically that there's also students that encounter problems and they are not sure whether they can get help in the first place and who can they reach out to. So sometimes students are left wondering what organizations, what resources they have available to them, and unfortunately, if some of them want to make a complaint, the problem then there is they're worried about it impacting their immigration status, such as most students are hoping that eventually someday they can become a permanent resident. And if they're encountering some problems, potentially they're a victim of sexual assault or other crimes, instead of reaching out for help, they are more concerned about whether or not they'll be able to become a permanent resident if they contact the authorities. And that's rather concerning, and I would like to advise that if you are ever in a situation like that, you should definitely reach out and get the assistance that you do need. So another thing is whether we are seeing an increase in international students coming to Canada. That's actually definitely something that we are encountering. We're seeing a lot of students coming from India, from China. Primarily, we're finding that they're looking for a better life when they do immigrate to Canada. It is also important to note that the increase does seem to benefit the Canadian economy. So it's become actually a multi-billionaire industry in Canada, and international students are paying a lot more fees than a Canadian student. In fact, I would like to share, over the past decade, Canada has seen a huge increase in international students. Just in 2014 to 2018, the international student population increased by 68%, and this number increased by 13% again in 2019. There are currently over 642,000 international students in Canada, and the province of BC hosts the second largest international student population in the country. These numbers are expected to only increase in the coming years. So some things that students should be aware of in terms of coming to Canada on a study permit and coming for immigration purposes. The reason a study permit is called a study permit is because it allows students to come to Canada and study here. And it's important for students to remember that this is an opportunity to come and pursue an education and potentially a career. And if you follow the path and you get a study permit, then you get a postgraduate work permit if you finished your studies. And then after that, if you work in the designated area, that is a potential pathway to become a permanent resident in Canada. So it is important that Students make sure that they're complying with the conditions of their study permits and they're using them for what the purpose is for that permit. Another thing is it's important for students, for any reason, if let's say they take a leave or any other reason prevents them from potentially carrying on with their study obligations, that they in fact make immigration aware of that. It's important that students remain in compliance of their study permit obligations and conditions, because that can actually cause issues later on when they are hoping to become a permanent resident. Okay, so another thing that I would like to share is that it's very important for international students to make sure that once they arrive to Canada that they have medical insurance. It isn't until approximately 3 months later that our students covered by the MSP program in BC or potentially other provinces, but however, every province has their own law. And when there is no medical coverage and the student is here, it's possible if a medical issue does arise and they have no medical coverage, that their medical bills and expenses will easily add up, and that will be a great hardship for them. We have seen bills which have been in the amount of thousands and thousands of dollars. So I would highly recommend that you make sure at all times when you're present in Canada that you do have valid and proper medical coverage. There might be a time when for some reason you may have thought that you have a study permit status or a visitor visa status or a work permit status, and for some reason it lapsed or it got, your status expired for some reason. And at that time it's possible that you might not have medical coverage. So please do make sure that all times you are covered by medical insurance if you're already not receiving MSP coverage. What is the difference between civil or criminal proceedings? So for criminal proceedings, if you choose to report a crime against a perpetrator to the police or the RCMP, it's likely that first an investigation will be started once the report has been made, and this can potentially start a criminal case in court based on if there is, enough there and a criminal prosecutor also prosecutes the crime against the perpetrator. A criminal case can potentially lead to a conviction and charges. On the other hand, a civil case or civil claim allows the victim or a survivor of a crime to receive monetary compensation from the perpetrator for the damages that were caused to them, potentially from even a situation like sexual assault. However, this is on a case-by-case basis, and it's going to be decided by, the judge in court. Something else that I would like to share is a very serious crime, which is if there's an individual that's been sexually assaulted. Unfortunately, that is happening with international students. It's difficult because a lot of students worry about contacting authorities. They also are reluctant to, as I earlier shared, they're worried about their permanent residency status being impacted. However, I just want to share that, it is an option you have. If you have been sexually assaulted, it is important to contact the police, make a report. The system in Canada is a lot different than what you might have experienced in your own home countries, and after a police report is made, once again an investigation might be started. After that, it'll go through the criminal justice process. Also, you have the access to the information, such as you have a right to finding out the perpetrator's name, what was the decision in court. All of this is available to you. It's actually under the BC Victims Act. Another thing is, I don't practice family law. However, it's possible that if there is an individual who is, harassing you, making you uncomfortable, potentially there's been assault, and you fear this individual, there are other factors that have to be taken into account by the court. Under the BC Family Law Act, you have the option to apply to the court and seek a protection order against the perpetrator or this individual. It will go through the court process, and it is important to get a family law lawyer. However, it's important because if you fear for your safety, you can get legal protection from that individual. You do not need to wait for any charges to be laid against this person. And in order to get a protection order from the court, the individual must follow the orders listed in the requirements, such as the order might include such as something like staying away from you or your family, staying away from your school, from your workplace, from your home residence. And these are conditions or placed on that individual, and they are highly enforced by the police for another person's safety. I would also like to share that if you are a victim of sexual assault and you're new to the country or you already are resident in BC, basically any individual that's encountering this crime and they're a victim of it, it's such a serious crime that you should never be on your own. You should get the assistance that you do need. So the first step would be to contact a police officer, contact the RCMP, make a report. Another step is that it's important to seek medical attention and go to the local hospital or a walk-in clinic, and potentially you may also want to reach out to a counselor because there's a lot of trauma. There's you're a victim, you might be a victim of sexual assault, physical violence, verbal, emotional, and it's important to get the help that you do need. And another place that you can reach out to for assistance or help is within your university or your college or even any school you're at. There's usually counselors there. There's campus resources. Definitely reach out to your actual studying institute. So I would like to also address that if you are a victim of sexual assault and or there's some other reason that arises and you need to take some time off from your studies and your goal is ultimately to remain in compliance with the study permit as well, and you're worried what you can do there, you are allowed to take a leave for approximately 150 days. There are some steps along the way. For example, you may need to get approval from your designated learning institute. You also need to make sure that you resume within 150 days. However, if you cannot, then it's important to do a change of status. So changing the initial study permit to a visitor visa or to a work permit status. So it's important to get legal advice along the way. And it is also crucial that if there ever are any sort of changes that you, in fact, update immigration and, at all times have your school updated as well. Another thing I would like to bring to your attention is that, if you are seeking a leave from your studies, you're not allowed to be working at the same time when you are on leave. So, earlier we just talked about when you can take a leave and when a student can request a leave. So I'm just going to go through some situations where a student can request a leave. And so one is medical illness or injury. If a student is pregnant, if there's a family emergency, or there's a death or serious illness of a family member. Also, a change in program of study within the same institution outside a regularly scheduled break. Any dismissals or suspensions, and this might depend on how severe the suspension or dismissal is or what the situation is. Postponed program start date, and in particular to sexual assault situations. The IRCC has not really specified or listed that, if you've been sexually assaulted, then what can you seek leave? However, a lot of victims, because of the trauma, because of the physical, emotional, psychological suffering that they've encountered, it seems like it would fall under medical illness or injury, and potentially it would be a ground for seeking leave. Another thing is that can a student take leave more than once? There are situations where unfortunately a student may need to do that. They are allowed, however, once again, this is, it's a case-by-case thing. An immigration officer will most likely wonder why. It's important to have evidence and support for this as well. For example, if it is, let's say, a medical condition or situation medically, potentially having documentary evidence from a doctor or a medical professional that, clarifies that the reason why you've had to take more than one leave. I would like to share that there are a lot of community organizations available to international students as well when they are facing certain situations, including sexual assault violence. And, for example, in Surrey, there's legal organizations such as SALC BC, Access Pro Bono, and there's more victim-oriented organizations as well when you're in need of more, personal help as well. There's a Surrey Women's Center, EVA BC, WAVAW, Mosaic, 211, and Victim Link. And there are always more resources as well if you do a even general Google search.